My mother laughed as she introduced me as just an assistant to the CEO, completely ignoring the medal hidden inside my purse. In this story of justice and hidden identity, she did not realize that the four generals walking through the gala doors were not there for the business deal, but were there to salute me. My name is Delilah Kim. For the better part of 2 decades, my existence within the Kim family hierarchy has been roughly equivalent to a piece of outdated office furniture, necessary perhaps for the background, but essentially invisible and easily replaced. To the outside world, the Kims were a dynasty of industry and innovation. My father, Robert, ran a mid-sized manufacturing conglomerate. My mother, Eleanor, was the socialite architect of their public image. And then there was Lucas, my older brother, the golden boy, the heir apparent, and perhaps the most incompetent businessman to ever wear a tailored suit. And then there was me. To them, I was Delilah the disappointment, Delilah the clerk, Delilah who supposedly lacked the ambition to climb the corporate ladder and settled for a boring, low-paying government job pushing papers in the basement of some gray building in D.C. They believed I was an administrative assistant level 1, a GS nothing. They believed I filed tax returns or sorted mail for people who actually mattered. They were wrong. They were so spectacularly wrong that it was almost impressive. The reality was that I did work for the government, yes, but I didn't sort mail. I was a major general in the United States Army, specializing in strategic intelligence and cyber warfare. I held a top-secret SCI clearance that would make my father's head spin. I had advised the president. I had coordinated operations that saved thousands of lives. But because my work was classified, and because my family never cared enough to look past the surface, I let them believe the lie. It was easier. It kept them safe, and truthfully, it allowed me to see exactly who they were when they thought no one of consequence was watching. The dynamic had been set since childhood. Lucas was the star. I was the shadow. If Lucas got a C on a report card, the teacher was blamed. If I got an A, I was asked why I didn't do extra credit. As we transitioned into adulthood, the gap widened. Lucas was handed a VP position at Dad's company straight out of college, despite barely graduating. I enlisted in the Army at 18, putting myself through university and officer candidate school, rising through the ranks with a ferocity that terrified my enemies and earned the respect of my peers. But to my parents, my uniform was just a costume for a job that didn't pay millions. When I eventually transitioned to a role that required me to work primarily out of the Pentagon in civilian attire, the clerk narrative cemented itself in their minds. I remember a specific Tuesday evening about 3 months before the gala. It was a mandatory family dinner. My mother insisted on these weekly tortures to maintain the illusion of a happy family unit. I drove my 10-year-old sedan to their sprawling estate, parking it down the street so as not to clutter their driveway, which was occupied by Lucas's brand-new Porsche and my father's S-Class. When I walked in, the air was thick with tension. They were seated in the formal dining room, the crystal chandelier casting a harsh light on their scowls. "You are late," my mother snapped, not looking up from her salad. I checked my watch. "I am exactly on time, Mother. 7 o'clock sharp." 7 o'clock is late when we have important matters to discuss," Lucas muttered, pouring himself a glass of wine that cost more than my supposed weekly paycheck. He didn't even look me in the eye. He just gestured vaguely to the empty seat at the end of the table, the spot furthest from the head. I sat down, placing my napkin in my lap. The important matter was, as always, money. Lucas had made a bad bet on a supplier in Southeast Asia, and the company was bleeding cash. They needed liquidity. "We need you to sign over the deed to your apartment," my father said. He didn't ask, he demanded.
If you are enjoying the story, please like and subscribe. Also, please comment, as your feedback helps to improve the stories coming.
It wasn't even a nice apartment, just a small condo I kept near the city for appearances, though I actually spent most of my time at a secure residence on base. Excuse me? I asked, keeping my voice level. That is the only asset I publicly own. Don't be selfish, Delilah, my mother interjected, finally looking at me with eyes cold as ice. Lucas needs collateral for a bridge loan. The bank is being difficult. We need every asset in the family pot. You know how important the family legacy is. When Lucas succeeds, we all succeed. I took a slow breath. I was currently managing a budget of $4 billion for a joint task force. I knew more about logistics and finance than Lucas would ever learn in 10 lifetimes. I cannot do that, I said calmly. Lucas made the error in judgment regarding the supply chain. He needs to fix it, or you need to restructure. Leveraging my home for a high-risk loan is bad strategy. Lucas slammed his hand on the table, the silverware rattling. Bad strategy? What would you know about strategy, Delilah? You file receipts. You answer phones. You are a glorified secretary. Do not lecture me on business. I am trying to save this family while you play it safe with your government benefits. Robert, tell her, my mother hissed. My father looked at me with pure disdain. You will sign the papers tomorrow. You have no ambition, Delilah. You never have. We provide you with a safety net. We invite you to these dinners. We tolerate your mediocrity. The least you can do is support your brother who is actually out there in the arena, fighting for our name. I looked at them. Really looked at them. I saw the greed, the arrogance, and the absolute lack of love. No, I said. I will not. The silence that followed was deafening. That night, I was essentially kicked out before the main course was served. They screamed that I was ungrateful, that I was dead to them financially, which was laughable considering I had never taken a dime from them since I was 18. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. It was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Marcus Thorne. General Kim? Thorne's voice rumbled. We have a situation in the Pacific sector. I need you in the tank in 20 minutes. I'm on my way, sir, I replied, my voice shifting instantly from the downtrodden daughter to the commanding officer. That was the duality of my life. In one world, I was a failure. In the other, I was essential. The escalation continued over the next few weeks. My refusal to sign the loan papers caused a rift that turned into open hostility. They stopped inviting me to dinners, which was a blessing, but they ramped up the emotional abuse via text and voicemail. My mother would leave long, winding messages about how I was breaking her heart, how I was jealous of Lucas, how I was punishing them for my own lack of success. Then came the engagement party incident. Lucas had managed to secure an engagement with Vanessa, a daughter of a prominent senator. It was a strategic alliance more than a romance. The party was held at a vineyard. I was invited, but only because my absence would raise questions. When I arrived, wearing a simple but elegant navy dress, my mother intercepted me at the entrance. "What are you wearing?" she hissed, grabbing my arm. "A cocktail dress. The invitation said cocktail attire." "You look like a waiter," she sneered, though the dress was silk and perfectly appropriate. "Actually, that gives me an idea. The catering staff is short-handed. Since you didn't chip in for the gift, you can make yourself useful." She wasn't joking. She literally tried to herd me toward the kitchen. I simply stepped around her. "I am a guest, Mother. I will behave like one." I spent the evening standing on the periphery. I watched my parents fawn over the senator, laughing too loudly at his jokes. I watched Lucas preen like a peacock, boasting about contracts that didn't exist yet. At one point, I went to the restroom and overheard my mother talking to Vanessa's mother, the senator's wife. "Oh, Delilah?" "Yes, the one in the blue. It's tragic, really," my mother was saying, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "She just never launched. We tried everything. Tutors, opportunities. She just lacks the spark. She works as a low-level clerk for the army. Very tedious work. We tried to include her, but she's quite resentful of Lucas's success. We worry about her mental stability sometimes." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. It wasn't just that they didn't respect me, it was that they were actively assassinating my character to strangers to elevate themselves. They used my mediocrity to highlight their own magnanimity in caring for me.
I walked out of the stall. The senator's wife looked at me, then back at my mother, awkwardness flooding her face. My mother didn't even flinch. She just gave me a cold smile that said, "You can't touch me." I left the party early. I had a briefing at 0600 anyway. The breaking point, the moment where the universe finally decided to balance the scales, came with the National Defense Gala. This was the big one, the event of the decade. It was a black-tie gathering of the military-industrial complex, politicians, foreign dignitaries, and the highest echelons of the armed forces. My family, specifically Kim Industries, was on the brink of collapse. Lucas's bridge loan had fallen through. Their only hope was to secure a massive subcontract with one of the primary defense firms, Lockheed or Raytheon. To do that, they needed to be at this gala, and they needed to impress. They had bought a table that cost $25,000, money they didn't have, likely put on a credit card maxed to the limit. 2 days before the event, my mother showed up at my apartment door. It was the first time she had ever visited. She looked around my modest living room with a sneer. "We need you to come to the gala on Saturday," she announced, not bothering to sit. "Why?" I asked. I usually avoided these events in a public capacity to keep my world separate. "Because we need to look like a wholesome, supportive family unit," she said. "The senator will be there. Investors will be there. We need a full table. You will come. You will sit quietly. You will not drink too much, and you will not speak unless spoken to. And for God's sake, wear something that hides your arms." I almost laughed. My arms were toned from daily combat training, but I realized something. This was it. This was the venue where my two lives were destined to collide. I had already been scheduled to attend the gala, not as a guest, but as a key speaker and honoree. I was receiving the Distinguished Service Medal for the cyber operation I had led the previous winter. I looked at my mother. "Okay," I said, "I'll be there." She looked surprised by my easy acquiescence. "Good. Do not embarrass us, Delilah. This is Lucas's night to shine." Saturday arrived. The atmosphere at the convention center was electric. Security was tight. Secret Service, MP detachments, private security. My parents and Lucas arrived in a rented limousine. I arrived separately, entering through the VIP back entrance to change into my dress uniform before blending in. However, I decided to play their game for the first hour. I wore a long trench coat over my uniform, buttoned all the way up, looking for all the world like a woman wearing a cheap coat over a bad dress. I met them in the lobby. My mother was wearing a gown that sparkled aggressively. Lucas was in a tuxedo that was slightly too tight. My father looked nervous, sweating profusely. "Take that coat off," my mother hissed as I approached. "I'm cold," I lied. "I'll keep it on for now." "You look like a homeless person," Lucas muttered. "Just stay behind us. If anyone asks, you're my personal assistant tonight. It sounds better than government clerk." We moved into the ballroom. It was a sea of uniforms and designer gowns. My parents were scanning the room like predators looking for prey. They spotted the CEO of a major defense contractor, a man named Mr. Henderson. Robert Kim practically ran over to him, dragging us along. "Mr. Henderson, so good to see you." Mr. Henderson looked polite but disinterested. "Ah, Robert, enjoying the evening?" "Immensely," Robert beamed. "You know my son, Lucas, our VP of Operations, and my wife, Eleanor. And this is Delilah. She helps us out with the paperwork sometimes. Just an assistant, really." My mother laughed, that tinkling fake laugh. "Oh, she tries her best. She works for the Army, actually. Low level, logistics and filing. We are so proud of her humble contributions." She patted my shoulder condescendingly. I felt the weight of the medal inside my pocket, the one I hadn't pinned on yet. Mr. Henderson looked at me. He was a sharp man. He noticed my posture. He noticed the way I was scanning the room, not at the people, but at the exits and security detail. "Nice to meet you, Delilah," he said. Suddenly, the room's ambient noise dropped. The chatter died down. The heavy double doors at the front of the ballroom swung open. A hush fell over the crowd, the kind of silence that commands respect. The master of ceremonies' voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the Joint Chiefs of Staff." My parents scrambled to stand at attention, looking excited. "This is it," Lucas whispered. "If we can get a photo with them." 4 men walked in, the highest-ranking officers in the United States military. They were decked out in full dress blues and greens, chests heavy with ribbons. Leading them was General Marcus Thorne, a man known as the Iron Hammer. My father nudged me. "Stand up straighter, Delilah. Show some respect. You're looking at your boss's boss's bosses." The generals began to walk through the crowd. They weren't stopping for the politicians. They weren't stopping for the billionaires. They were walking with purpose, cutting a path directly through the center of the room. They were heading straight for our table. "Oh my God," my mother gasped, clutching her pearls. "They're coming here! Robert, they're coming here! Fix your tie!" Lucas puffed out his chest. He prepared his hand for a handshake. He put on his best winning smile. General Thorne and his entourage stopped 3 feet from us. The entire room was watching. My father stepped forward, his hand extended. "General Thorne, what an honor!" General Thorne didn't even look at him. He looked past my father, past my mother, past Lucas. His steely gaze locked directly onto me.
Without a word, General Thorne snapped his heels together. The sound echoed in the silent room. He raised his hand in a crisp, sharp salute. The 3 other generals behind him did the same immediately. The room froze. My father's hand was left hanging in the air. Lucas's smile faltered. My mother looked confused, glancing behind me to see who they were saluting. There was no one behind me. Slowly, deliberately, I unbuttoned my trench coat. I let it slide off my shoulders and catch on the back of the chair. Underneath, I was wearing the midnight blue mess dress uniform of a major general. On my shoulders, the 2 stars gleamed under the chandeliers. On my chest, a rack of ribbons that told the story of 3 wars, covert ops, and valor. I stood tall, returning the salute with the practiced precision of 20 years. "General Thorne," I said, my voice projecting clearly. "General Kim," Thorne replied, lowering his hand. "We were worried you wouldn't make it. The president has been asking for your assessment on the grid situation." "I was detained by local traffic," I said, casting a glance at my family. The color drained from my father's face. It didn't just fade, it vanished. He looked like a corpse. My mother's mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water. Lucas looked at my shoulders, counting the stars, his brain unable to process what he was seeing. "General?" my father whispered, his voice cracking. Mr. Henderson, the CEO they had been trying to impress, stepped forward. He looked at me, then at my parents, and chuckled dryly. "Robert," he said, "you told me she was a clerk. You didn't tell me your daughter was the deputy director of Cyber Command." I didn't," my father stammered. General Thorne turned his cold eyes onto my father. "You must be the family. Delilah rarely speaks of you. I can see why." He didn't shout. He didn't scold. He just delivered a verdict with the weight of the entire U.S. military behind it. "General Kim is one of the most valuable assets this nation possesses," Thorne continued, addressing the room but looking at Lucas. "She has done more for global security in a week than most do in a lifetime. If you were under the impression she was an assistant, then you are woefully uninformed about the woman standing next to you." He turned back to me. "Major General, we have a seat for you at the head table. The Secretary of Defense wants a word." "Thank you, sir," I said. I picked up my purse. I turned to my family one last time. They looked small. They looked terrified. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the sheer, crushing realization of their own stupidity. "Delilah?" my mother squeaked. "Major General Kim," I corrected her gently. I walked away. I left them standing there amidst the whispers and the stares of the most powerful people in the country. I walked to the head table and took my seat among my peers.
The rest of the night was a blur of congratulations and networking, but I kept an eye on my family's table.
They didn't stay long. They couldn't. The humiliation was too absolute. Every time someone walked by their table, they pointed. I saw Mr. Henderson shake his head and walk away from my father when he tried to re-engage the conversation. The deal was dead. You don't insult a general's family, and you certainly don't insult the general herself, especially when she's the one deciding which contractors get security clearance for upcoming projects. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The drive home that night must have been silent, but my phone blew up the next morning. Text messages, missed calls, "We need to talk. Why didn't you tell us? How could you hide this?" I didn't answer. Instead, I sent a courier. 2 days later, my father's company lost its certification for government contracts. It wasn't an act of revenge, it was standard protocol. During the gala, security officers had overheard Lucas making disparaging remarks about classified operations he claimed to know about, which were lies, and my father's financial instability flagged him as a security risk. With my rank revealed, the scrutiny on my immediate family intensified, and they failed the vetting process miserably. Kim Industries filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy 3 months later. But the final confrontation happened a week after the gala. I went to their house, not to apologize, but to collect the few personal items I had left there in storage. They were waiting for me in the living room. The atmosphere was different now. It wasn't arrogant, it was desperate. "Delilah," my father started, standing up, We didn't know." "You didn't ask," I said, continuing to pack a box of old books. "We're family," my mother pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time, born of fear. "You can fix this. One phone call from you and the contracts come back. One call and the bank approves the loan. Please, for Lucas." I stopped and looked at Lucas. He was sitting on the couch, head in his hands. He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw him not as a bully, but as a pathetic, spoiled child who had never been told no. "Help us, Dee," he whispered. I looked around the house they threatened to kick me out of, the house where they told me I was worthless. "I can't," I said. "Won't or can't?" my father asked aggressively, a flash of his old anger returning. "Tan't," I replied. "Giving a security clearance to a company with your financial mismanagement and compromised judgment would be a violation of federal law. I would be court-martialed. And frankly, you aren't worth my career." I walked to the door, the box in my hands. "You called me a clerk because it made you feel big," I said, turning back one last time. "You needed me to be small so Lucas could look tall. But the truth is, I never needed you to be big. I just needed you to be parents, and you failed that assignment a long time ago." I walked out the door. The sun was shining. My driver was waiting by the curb in a black government SUV. "Where to, General?" the sergeant asked as he opened the door for me. "The Pentagon," I said. "I have work to do." I didn't look back as we drove away. For years, I had sought their approval, enduring their insults, hiding my light so I wouldn't blind them. But as the car merged onto the highway, I realized that the heavy weight I had been carrying wasn't the secret of my rank, it was the weight of their expectations, and I had finally set it down. My family called me a clerk. The army called me a general. But for the first time in my life, I just called myself free. If you believe the truth always finds a way out, like the video, and please comment and subscribe if you enjoyed the story and want more revenge stories where betrayal meets consequences. Your feedback helps me to improve the videos.